Hi everybody. Good afternoon everybody and welcome to Niser Open Day. As you all know, many of you know that we actually open the doors of Niser to the public to actually view the labs, go around the labs, and we have been conducting this program for almost more than 10-15 years. From the inception of Niser, we have been conducting this program and it is very well appreciated. But with the pandemic, actually we could not continue it last year. We are really glad that we could do it virtually, and without going more into the details, we can talk over the next 2 hours. I would now request Professor Sudhakar Panda, Director Niser, to just open the session virtually. Sir, could you please?
Yes. Thank you, Devasmita. Good afternoon, everyone. Dear students and teachers, my colleagues from Niger, and the volunteers, and the main two speakers. I congratulate all of you. First, even in this difficult time during the pandemic, Niger is celebrating its Open Day. And actually, in my opinion, it should be called Closed Day. As Dr. Devasmita mentioned, we have been organizing this Niger Open Day for more than 10 years, and I have been part of it for last few years. And the excitement I see among the students from various schools who come for the day, participate in various activities, their teachers also come with them. It gives me a different feeling, and I used to really feel that it's actually a Niger Open Day. The doors were open, the gate was open, students, for the young minds, was full of curiosity what's happening and why it's happening. There's science, and that's basically the Open Day is devoted to various activity we do with Niger, mainly science. And unfortunately this year, for obvious reasons, we are not able to get you to our campus, but still we wanted that the tradition should continue, and I'm happy that whatever we could do under this circumstance, we are able to put up and organize this day. And as you know, some of you actually might have visited my campus earlier. Niger, the full form is National Institute of Science, Education and Research, and it has 7 schools. 6 of them are science-oriented: biological science, chemical science, mathematical science, physical science, computer science, then earth and planetary science. Besides this main school of science streams, we also have one humanities school where various things from the humanities point of view, what we feel, even if we are making a career in science, we should know what's happening, what is the history of science, what the psychology behind a scientist, and besides economics, and there is also a big factor of economics in science managing. That's what I do. I hardly do any science now, but I try to do that, how to manage this institute, how to manage the scientists, how to manage the young students who enter at the age of 18, 19 and aspiring to be scientists. Believe me, I find it more difficult than the time I was doing science and doing research. But everything has its worth. So I will have sacrificed my science for managing this science institute and producing many scientists and future scientists. And again, I welcome you to Niger, even if it is virtual. And I hope the 2 talks, very interesting talks my colleagues have chosen, and you will listen it, you will ask the questions, you will interact with them, and at the end, basically, you will learn something, and most importantly, think about it. Just listening the teachers, listening the lecture is not enough. That is not science. You have to ask the questions, why it is like this, how it came like this, how it will happen if something else would have happened. This anxiety should be there in your mind. You should ask questions to yourself. and look for the answer by yourself. In case you don't get it, ask your teachers or ask my colleagues through mails and emails. And I hope the afternoon you will enjoy. Take care of yourself and be healthy, be safe, or wherever you are. And please follow the guidelines of COVID. Otherwise, we ourselves will blame us that we didn't follow, we suffer. Thank you very much. Over to you, Devasmita. You are mute. You are mute.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for coming between the meetings and at least starting the session. It is really a great pleasure to have you around. So we will continue with the talks, and we will keep you posted with the updates. How is it happening?
Hi.
Thank you so much. And to just talk to the people, we have around 500 teachers, students, principals who have actually joined through YouTube, and we have almost.
I hope they are able to hear me.
Yeah, actually 50 or so have joined through Zoom link, but I'm hoping there are more than 2,000 people who have registered. So we are just hoping that with time they will join in, and we will continue with the program. To just okay, sir. Thank you so much. Bye, sir. And so to keep the ball rolling, so with the first talk, I would invite Dr. Roy. Anirudh Roy. Anirudh, can you please switch on your video? Okay, hi. So Anirudh is the newest of the faculty in the School of Biological Sciences, right? One of the newest of the faculty, and is quite young, but young in his career. But one of the skins on which he works on has been named after him. He works with various aspects of evolution, and he will be updating about those perspectives of evolution. I actually liked his topic a lot. He says that evolution of a perspective called the perspective of evolution, right? So this is something which we will try to learn from him, what he wants to tell to us about it. And Roy, I just forgot one thing. I just need to thank Shri Chokdar and Shri Ashok Mishra. These are two additional commissioners of KVs and KV at Chhattisgarh region and Bhubaneswar region. They are with us today, and they actually could take the things to all the schools KV around in Bhubaneswar and in Odisha as well as Chhattisgarh. So thank you for the wide circulation, and we'll keep the event going on. Okay, so all to you, Roy. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Let me just load my presentation.
Sure. Perfect.
Is it visible?
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. One second. Can I get started, Devasmita?
Sure.
All right.
You can hear me, right? Yeah.
Yes,
sure.
I can. Yeah. All right. So on the onset, I'd sincerely like to thank Niser Outreach for giving me an opportunity to talk to young impressionable minds, not just in Niser, but even outside Niser in various schools and colleges. And so the title of my talk, as you can see, is The Evolution of a Perspective, called The Perspective of Evolution. It is a tongue twister. It is also clickbaity, and it is clickbaity because precisely I wanted it to be clickbaity. And what I'm going to be talking about today is just basically give you how evolution is actually a thought process. It's not how you it's different how you actually see evolution as compared to some of the other sciences, and a very apt way of actually representing evolution is actually this figure which says that all of us actually share a common ancestor. And what I will do is just basically give you an idea of how this idea of evolution actually evolved over time. Pardon the pun. And then I'll be talking about some issues that biologists generally face. It will be slightly spicy, so hold on for that. And then I'll be talking about some exciting research that we do in the lab. And I also want to take the opportunity of using this forum to inaugurate our newly minted lab logo, which has been designed by my lab members. All right. So let's get started with the brass tacks. So, like the title suggests, the evolution of a perspective called the evolution of a perspective called the perspective of evolution. So in my opinion, evolution is not just a branch in biology, just the way that biochemistry or histology or immunology or all these other biological sciences that you can think of are. So evolution is more of a logical framework within which we view all biological facts coming from various subdisciplines of biology. In other words, evolution is what we use to make sense of biology. It's actually a perspective from which every branch of biology can actually benefit. In fact, not just every branch of biology, but even other sciences can benefit, right? And what's interesting is that this perspective, just like any other perspectives, did not actually come overnight. So there's a long process that actually went through to get to where we are right now. And there's been a gradual change in thought process. And like Professor Panda, or director, pointed out, hopefully these these two talks that we're going to present today are something that will make you that will get you start to think more along these lines. Okay. So, like I said, there have been numerous small changes that have given rise to this theory of evolution, right? Now, I want to just step back a little, and I want to make a point here. The way that we actually use the word theory in science and the way that we use theory in general English language are very different. In general English, it's a statement. Theory is basically a statement that is not backed up by proof. But in science, a theory is something that has passed the rigors of the scientific process. So it has been tested not just once, but multiple times, and then it is found to be true, right? In other words, a theory in science is the exact opposite of what a theory in general English is, right? So here is the definition of what evolution is. Don't worry about it, because I'm going to illustrate this with an example. But in general, so I just wanted to want you to understand that the theory of evolution is just like other theories in science. For example, the theory of gravity, the theory of electromagnetism. So these are very different from the general English language theory that we use. Okay, and basically what the theory of evolution suggests is that species change over time, right? And often when you just Google evolution, this is something that comes up very frequently. And so this is basically a picture that shows that there's a chimpanzee, and that has basically evolved into a human. So then the obvious question is, if the humans have evolved from monkeys, then why are the monkeys still around? That's precisely because this diagram is actually wrong, and you should not be using this as something that is representative of evolution, right? So humans did not actually evolve from monkeys or chimpanzee. Rather, humans and all other monkeys and apes have actually evolved from a monkey-like ancestor long ago. This also means that the apes, like chimpanzees and these other gorillas and all, so they're not our ancestors. They're in fact our cousins, right? And sorry to break the bubble. So for all practical purposes, we are actually apes. In fact, there's a lot of controversy related to our genus name. So remember that the chimpanzees are called pan. So there are two species of chimpanzees, pan troglodytes and pan paniscus. And we are Homo sapiens. But we should not actually be put in a different genus because we are so close by. It's basically our ego that has made us put ourselves in a different genus. Okay, so we know this now. You know, there's been a lot of study over this. We know this now. It is understandable if we didn't know this earlier because we look a lot different from the other apes. But there's been decades of research that has shown us this pattern where, you know, humans are basically glorified apes, right? And we also know that we all share a single common ancestor. But this is not something, this thought process is not something that actually came overnight. In fact, if you were to go back to say 1700 and you know, get in touch with someone who is really well educated, that person is basically going to say that the earth is 1,000 years old. We now know that the earth is about 4.5 billion years old, right? But at that point of time, the idea was that the earth was 1,000 years old. And all the species that we see today, everything, the lion, tiger, everything, all the species that we see today were always there. You know, they didn't evolve from something that was much more simple. So they're basically, you know, dharti se prakat types. And the adaptations that we have, they were basically produced by divine interventions, right? So there was a lot of creationism during that time. For example, the human eye. And the idea during that time was that the human eye is actually a fantastic feat of nature. But in fact, we now know that actually our eye is not as good as the eye of an octopus, right? In fact, our eye is really badly designed, right? More importantly, any educated person during that time in the 1700s would believe that there have been no extinctions during that time. So no evolution, no extinctions. But does that mean, so you've heard of fossils, right? So does that mean people have not got fossils during that time? Of course they have. And one of the most common fossils that were there, that was available in a lot of different parts of Europe, especially, were these fossils of these marine organisms, and these are called ammonites. And at that point of time, basically, these ammonites are called snake stones. And the belief was basically that when snakes die, they coil up and turn into stone, right? What was curious is that none of these ammonites or these snake stones really had a head. So some of the artists actually also took the creative liberty to actually put a head on them, just to, you know, make sure that everyone believes that these are basically snakes that turn into stones, right? And this was the idea during for a very long time, until about 1831, when the 22-year-old Charles Darwin actually took a ship journey. So this ship journey was basically, it started from London, and it was basically supposed to be for 2 years. And it was supposed to basically map the coast of South America. So it was just basically supposed to map this particular coast. But this ship journey, instead of taking 2 years, it actually took 5 years. And a large part of why it took 5 years is actually Charles Darwin. Because Charles Darwin, it's only after the ship journey started, Charles Darwin realized that he was seasick. And every time this ship would actually dock into some coast of South America, he would just run down. Once he gets land, he would just run inside into some forest, right? But the point is, he was actually a very keen observer. And by the time he started this journey, he already had an idea based on the literature that was available that the Earth is not 1,000 years old. It is maybe longer than that. It's 1,000,000 years old. And this is based on the erosion of rocks and the saltiness of the ocean. So we didn't know that the Earth was 4.5 billion years old, not that old, but he knew that the Earth was maybe a few million years old, right? And he basically wanted to know. He was a very keen naturalist, very keen observer of nature, and he wanted to know how species actually form. That was his main idea. And he went around across a lot of different places, and he saw some really interesting stuff. So some of these interesting stuff include, watching armadillos. So these are living armadillos that he saw moving around, fossils of the armadillos. So the ancestors of these armadillos were really big. They were almost the size of a room. And these are called glyptodon. So this is an artist rendition of a glyptodon. So he basically saw these living armadillos scurrying around. And he clearly saw that there was some sort of similarity in the characters. When you look at the fossils and you look at that's something that is actually living, there's similarity in characters. Of course, there's a change in size, but there is something really strange going on here. That's what he actually thought during that time. So he went to the high up on the Andes mountains, which can get which can be covered in snow, and at that height he saw fossils that were of marine origin. How did that happen? Clearly, there must have been some dynamic change that the Earth is going through, right? And the fact that he understands that the Earth is actually going through a dynamic change changes a lot of things. It means not everything is static right now, right? And then, of course, there's a famous story about Darwin and Galapagos Islands, where he made a journey in multiple islands in the Galapagos Island archipelago. And there's also a story about finches, which are also called Darwin's finches. And he saw that there are these birds that seem to share some characters, but then they all are, adapted to very, very different kind of habitats. And then he went to Ecuador, which is not very far away from Galapagos, which is somewhere here. And he saw that, there are birds that look very close to the finches, right? And he thought about it and like, okay, maybe from Ecuador, there must have been something that flew towards the Galapagos Islands, and then they radiated into multiple species. He was already starting to, think about all of this. Now, what's interesting is in the meantime, there was this another gentleman called as Alfred Russel Wallace, who was, especially around the same time, he was roaming around the forests of Amazon. And then later, he also went to Southeast Asia. And both of them convergently came up with very, very similar ideas of how species formed. What's interesting and what you should note here is in both these cases, both these gentlemen had a very keen eye for nature that resulted in them having very similar ideas of how species are formed, even if it challenged the current general norms, right? So what did they actually observe? They observed that there is always going to be variation among individuals in a population, right? So let's say you take a population, there is always going to be variation within individuals within that population. And there is, they also observed that the offsprings actually resemble parents, just like you resemble your father or mother or both. They also saw that, of course, within the humans that they resemble their parents, but even in animals and plants, the offsprings actually resembled their parents. They had no idea about genetics during that time. Just remember that. They had no idea about Mendelian genetics, although, which is really interesting here, Mendel had actually published around a similar time. Mendel had actually published his work on genetics on heritability in one obscure German journal, and that was never found. That was found only much later in the 1900s. We'll get to that later. But the point here is that even though they didn't know anything about heritability, they knew that some traits are heritable. It can get passed on from the parent to the offspring. They also saw that not all offsprings can actually survive because of competition for resources. There is always going to be limited resources, so there is always going to be competition. You can't just keep producing offsprings, right? At some point, it will sort of saturate. And then individuals that have a trait or some character that helps them survive and reproduce will actually pass on the traits to their offsprings, if the traits are heritable. What do I mean by that? This is a very simple illustration about to explain actually what I'm saying. So let's say these are mice. So these mice, the way that these mice can be made up is either gray or brown, light brown, right? And the kind of surface that they live in are, say, really black rock, right? And the predator here is a bird, right? So the bird here is actually the selection pressure, right? Now, because if you're a bird, and if you were to say prey on these mice, then given this background, it will be much easier for you to actually see the light brown colored ones, right? So that would mean that the more of these black colored mice will survive, right? So given this selection pressure, what is really happening is these light brown colored ones are going down in number. In other words, the makeup of these light brown colored ones is going down in number, and the makeup that results in black colored mice is actually going up in number. So in other words, what is happening is there's evolution by means of natural selection. This is what Darwin and Wallace actually called evolution by means of natural selection, where say this predator is a selection force, right, or a selective pressure. And Darwin and Wallace actually published this together in Proceedings of Linnean Society together in 1858. And in 1859, the very famous book called Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection got published by Charles Darwin. And to this day, it is it's one of the best sold books. Right? It's fantastic, and if you ever get a chance to read it, please do so. Yeah, but remember that during that time, they actually challenged the current notion of, because people didn't really believe in evolution. They believed in divine interventions. And because of this, obviously, Darwin was ridiculed a lot. In fact, there are various cartoons available where people have drawn Darwin as a monkey, or, said things like man is nothing but a worm, or, Darwin is here hanging around just like a monkey going around from tree to tree. Right? So he was ridiculed, but he persisted, right? And that was the start. That laid the foundation of this whole thought process to what we know today. But again, it didn't happen overnight. So there were a series of experiments that proved again and again that this is actually true. In fact, one of the first experiments ever done was done actually in a lab, right? So inside a lab, you're in a controlled environment. There's this gentleman called William Dallinger who performed this experiment in a lab on this custom built incubator, which could go from 16 degrees to 70 degrees. And he basically used these protozoans, these unicellular organisms, which were very, very happy at 16 degrees centigrade. And if you slightly increase the temperature at about 24 degrees centigrade, they'll start feeling some amount of stress. So what he did was he basically did very slowly, he started increasing the temperature, right? Within the same population of protozoans. He did this very slowly. This experiment took about 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And at the end of the experiment, he basically had a population of protozoans that were happily living at 70 degrees centigrade, right? Which, just imagine something that started off being very comfortable at 16 degrees centigrade, and then he ended up with a population that was happily living at 70 degrees centigrade. This also happens to be the first instance of maladaptation, where these organisms that were very used to an environment where it's 70 degrees centigrade, high temperature, couldn't go back to being their normal self, which is where in low temperatures. One of the most profound influences that propagated Darwin's ideas was actually Ernst Haeckel. Right? He was the first one who actually coined the term ontogeny, phylogeny, and even ecology. The first time ecology was coined by Ernst Haeckel. And he was the first one to actually use Darwinian ideas to create or to build a tree of life. He used Darwinian ideas to also talk about social structure. He talked about how there should not be any hierarchy in social structures in humans, because all of us actually share a common ancestor, right? Besides doing all that, he was also a brilliant artist. And he started off writing his books in German, but then eventually they were translated in various other languages, including English. In fact, there is a gentleman from India who wanted to translate his books in Gujarati because he thought that people in India can actually benefit a lot from these ideas where there is no social hierarchy. The gentleman's name was Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. All right. So in 1900, three people, Carl Correns, Hugo de Vries, and Erich von Schermack, actually independently rediscovered the works of Gregor Mendel. And then it basically gave a birth to a completely different idea, right? So Gregor Mendel, he basically discovered genetics, and then now you had a mechanism that could potentially explain how natural selection happens, right? And he basically laid down the principles of all three of them. They basically laid down the principles and mechanisms of heredity. And later on, there were three gentlemen, Ronald Fisher, JBS Haldane, and Ahmad Zahavi, who were population geneticists, and they were instrumental in finding out whether Mendelian genetics is compatible with the theory of natural selection, with the natural selection, evolution in the means of natural selection, right? Ahmad Zahavi and Ronald Fisher were also very famous scientists who did a lot of work on sexual selection. And in fact, Ahmad Zahavi is the one who actually came up with the Zahavi's handicap principle, which is to explain why certain birds or males of certain species have very high ornamentation, right? So without going into a lot of details, just for the lack of time, one of the there were two reasons that he actually put forth why, so say a male peacock has really beautiful feathers. One is that it's basically showing off to the female that, look at my feathers, I'm free of all diseases, so I don't have any parasites, right? And the second reason being that in spite of carrying these heavy load of feathers and this ornamentation, just imagine having, because it has these bright feathers, it would also make the predator of these peacocks find it much more easier to spot them. But in spite of having these, the peacock is still able to live, right? It's still able to survive, and therefore it probably has really good genes, right? So this is another reason why Ahmad Zahavi suggested that in spite of having a handicap such as these ornamented feathers, it's still able to it's able to mate, right? Then there's JBS Haldane, like I said, who was a pioneer in population genetics, and then also finding out whether the genetics is compatible with natural selection or not. Haldane was also a big proponent of basic sciences, and you would be surprised to know that Haldane was actually a resident of Bhubaneswar. So in 1957, Haldane came down to India, and later on he became very good friends with Biju Patnaik, and he set up. He was a director of an institute of genetics in Bhubaneswar. And the reason why I'm putting this is because there's this very famous incident where one interviewer basically asked him, "So do you believe in creation? Do you believe God created all life?" He basically said that I don't know that, but if at all God created life, He must have an inordinate fondness for beetles, because there are just a ridiculous number of species of beetles. Okay, so moving on, there are actually two different lenses under which you can actually see evolution. One is called microevolution, and the other one is called macroevolution. So microevolution is basically the small processes that occur within, that cause changes within a population, and macroevolution is these small processes they cause larger patterns, cause speciation, right? Just to give you an example, this is an example of microevolution, right? So let's say you have a bunch of bacteria that you are infected with in your body, right? And then antibiotic is given. Now these bacteria have various variations in resistance level, right? So some of them have very high resistance to the antibiotic. Some of them have very low resistance, right? And when the antibiotic is given, it's only after selection, only the ones that are left are the ones that have very high resistance to the antibiotics, right? So this is basically just because of allele frequencies, or with the way they are made up, the microevolution has occurred. Macroevolution occurs at a larger scale, right? You can think of examples such as species. Here's a very interesting example. So there are these greenish wobblers called Phylloscopus trochloids, and some studies suggest that they originated in the southern part of the Himalayas, including India. And the population could not directly go up north because there was a Tibetan plateau here. So one part of the population actually went towards the west, the other one went towards the east. And we're talking about a really large area here, right? And the ones that went west and the one that went east were not able to, exchange genes with each other. And they also had experienced very, very different selection forces. Remember, I talked about selection force earlier. So by the time they actually met further north, they actually became two different species. They looked very different from each other. They were behaviorally very different from each other. So speciation has basically occurred, right? So this is basically macro evolution in a natural laboratory. And here it's basically the selection force that has made them change into two different species, right? Now, when the selection force is actually very, very interesting. And if you can track it, if you have strong powers of selection, you can get some amazing stuff. For example, the bat. The bat is an amazing animal. So humans, for example, can listen to noise from 0 decibels to 120 decibels. But anything from 90 decibel onwards can actually hurt your eardrum, right? Which is why when you go board a plane, you will always see this airline crew wearing these big fat earphones, or they will wear earplugs. So these bats actually find their prey using sonar, right? Which is obviously above 120 decibels. So their sonar is so efficient that they can not only find an animal that is flying around, but also be able to find the texture of that animal, right? So let's say there is a bat that is using the sonar and is able to track a moth that is flying around, right? So this is the moth that is flying around, and it finds the moth and it starts flying towards the moth, right? Now the moth also has ears, right? And the moth has heard the ultrasonic call of the bat, and it knows that the bat is following it. So the moth starts, going down. It starts flying down, right? It tries to get away from the bat, right? Now there are these tiny ectoparasites, tiny parasites that live inside the moth's ears, right? Now this can actually cloud hearing. It can actually impair the hearing of the moth. But you see the problem here. If the moth dies, then even these tiny mites also die, right? So it's a major problem because the mites don't want to die. The moth also doesn't want to die. So what is the solution? The solution is these mites only stay on one side of the ear. And this is a mechanism that has evolved by the power of natural selection. And when you have strong selection forces, some such wonderful things in biology can happen. So evolution as a thought process have obviously been used in multiple ways. And there are various applications of evolutionary principles. For example, there's artificial selection for food or milk production and all that. You have cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, and this is salgum. All of them, believe it or not, are actually the same species of plant. You're basically selecting multiple parts of the plant. They're actually the same species, even though they look so different from each other, right? Even the maize that you have today is actually much more selected variety. Even the different breeds of dogs that you see, so these are artificially bred different breeds of dogs. There's also evolutionary medicine. So I'm not going to talk in detail about this for the lack of time, but evolutionary medicine is not really a separate branch of medicine. It's basically using evolutionary biology principles to better the traditional medicine that we have, right? And if any of you are interested, you can ask me after the talk, and I'll be happy to explain this much further. Given this current time and scenario, obviously there are practical applications of evolutionary principles in epidemiology. It's because of epidemiology that we know where a particular strain of the virus has come from, right? So there are evolutionary trees that you can build to find out where this virus has come from, right? And therefore, you understand how evolution is so important in our daily life, right? And unless you believe in things like banging thalis or lighting diyas and clapping, uh, these do not work in actually getting rid of viruses, right? However, there's this constant uh, evolutionary biology and ecology are something that have been always ignored, right? And the heights of it is actually something that happened last year. um, for example, in CBSE there were complete chapters of ecology and evolution. You understand how evolution is important, especially given the current circumstances, right? So there were complete chapters of ecology and evolution that were deleted from the syllabus. So the students didn't really have much of an idea of evolutionary biology or the basics of evolutionary biology. It gets even worse. You know, you have various projects that are clear that are given clearance for clearing up huge swathes of forests. Now you know that these bats, the natural habitat of these bats, from which supposedly the virus has come from, is the forest, right? And if you connect two and two together, you would know that when you cut down forests, then these bats would come in touch with humans, and there you have a problem. But you know, all this doesn't make sense because there have been huge forests that have been cut down, right? So, as impressionable minds such as you, I think what I want to basically convey is you should think about evolution in a much better light than what it is actually currently shown. Talking about the same thing. So this is so like I said, ecology and evolution has been always been sort of looked down upon by various even other streams of biology. Heck, it's not just ecology and evolution, but biology itself has also been given names such as soft science and small science. And you know, there are these I know we're celebrating Science Day, and I know I'm speaking to young, impressionable minds, which is therefore I wanted to flag this issue because it seems rampant in science today, right? So I'm flagging this issue so that when you grow up to respect science for what it is, rather than draw lines of hierarchy within science. And what I basically want to say is you should just science if science is done in the right way, it is just science, right? And sometimes I actually understand why this thought process has actually come about, why biology is actually thought of as soft science or small science. Because it's very difficult for people in other non-biological sciences fields to realize that there is actually, so in most other sciences, there is either this or that, right? And I'm sure all biologists would agree that in biology, there is no either this or that. There is actually a continuum. In other sense, in other words, what I'm saying is the biological world is actually non-binary, right? So I'll give you a couple of examples of what I'm actually talking about. So you know that all snakes are limbless, right? And that would be either a this or that question, except that a lot of boas and pythons actually have limbs, right? So it's not that all snakes are limbless. It's not so clear, spick and span. Here's another really cool example. So there is a skink, there's this lizard called Cyphos equalis, which is found in Eastern Australia, right? And there is a population that is found in the plains, and the same population continues on to the highlands, right? Now, turns out the population in the plains, which is low down, is actually oviparous, which means that it actually lays eggs. The same species, part of the same population, the same species that is present in the highlands is actually viviparous, which means that it actually gives live birth. The same species, right? So you would think that there should be either this or that, but that's clearly not the case. There's a continuum. It gets even better. So the last year there was a population of these kings found in the Midlands. So a female in the same pregnancy actually gave the first three babies were born as oviparous in eggs, and the next three, the same individual in the same pregnancy, gave the next three births as viviparous within the same pregnancy, right? So that is just absolutely weird, right? Which is another reason to say why there is continuum in biology. It's not either this or that, right? And there was a paper published last year which talked about the gene expression part of this particular study. And I know when I talk about genes and proteins and all these things, it can bring about a sense of disgust in some people who are averse to such words. Let's just talk about macroevolution, right? Now, I talked about this particular example where this species, the population, when it met in the north, they became two different species, right? But there are other species also who have very different distributions, but there is no speciation in all of them. So just because one species has gone both on east and west and has speciated over across the Tibetan plateau doesn't mean that it will use the same pattern will be seen in all the other species, right? So I hope I made it clear that you should avoid terms like big science, small science, soft science, hard science. Celebrate science for what it is, right? In fact, last month, a colleague of mine from my department, he actually sent out this really wonderful paper that was published in Nature Physics. And if you ever get a chance, please read it. It doesn't have any jargon, so it basically talks about how beauty is perceived by biologists versus non-biologists, and how non-biologists need to realize that there is actually a continuum in biology. It's not the same in other sciences, right? Okay. Having said that, let me talk about some of the exciting work in very, very brief detail. About some of the work that my lab does. So we like to call ourselves the Biodiversity, Systematics, and Biogeography Lab. And like I said, this is our newly minted lab logo. So my PhD students are Avrajal, Bikash, and Pranay. And I have a few master students. There's Shagun, there's Ayush, there's Himesh, Vishwa, and Alex. And a large part of our work actually deals with the how interesting the geological history or the biological history of India, the Indian subcontinent actually is. Because I'm sure some of you are aware that India was actually attached to Africa and Madagascar long, long time ago, about 85 million years ago. And this was actually south of the equator at some point, right? Eventually, it broke off from Madagascar and it broke off from Seychelles. And there was a volcanic eruption within central India. And then immediately it turned towards Southeast Asia and then collided with Asia. And that collision basically is what resulted in the Himalayas, right? So there's been very interesting set of events that the India that we see today has gone through. And if you see the current Indian subcontinent today, you have everything from tropical forests to dry deciduous to open scrub to grasslands. So you have various relief features. It's very, very heterogeneous, right? So we basically use this premise to understand patterns of speciation in a lot of different model systems, starting from lizards to ants. So we have some really exciting work that we do in the lab. We also work on co-evolution or co-speciation. For example, here, this is a skink that you would very often see in your backyard, right? And these kinks often have these parasites. If you see these red colored dots, there are these parasites. And what we want to find out in the lab, what we are finding out in the lab is to see if there is any co-evolution, whether the parasite and the host, which is the skink here, has evolved very similarly. There's another master student of mine who's also working on co-evolution of ants and ant mimicking spiders. In fact, there are in these 4 photographs, there are 2 ants and 2 spiders. And I'm sure if just given a glance, it'll be very, very difficult for you to find out which one is an ant and which one is a spider. So these 2 are actually spiders. They look very, very similar to ants, but these are actually spiders. And these are mimics of these ants, which are models. There's another master student of mine who's doing some really exciting work on the ecology of yellow wattle lapwings, trying to find out their breeding ecology and hatchling success rate. So these are some of the really exciting stuff that we do in the lab. And if any of you want to get in touch with me, please, feel free to mail me, and I'll be happy to take any questions right now.
Okay, thank you, Roy, for the wonderful talk. I'm sure this will excite the students to think beyond the box. So let us see how. But I actually have to ask. I won't give the students an opportunity to go ahead and start asking the questions, but ask on their behalf. Okay, so I have one question from Nayan Kumar Sahu. I cannot really find out the school name, but are humans also changing day by day? That is his question for you.
Yeah, so this is something that that comes up very often. First things first, you have to realize that when you're talking about evolution, the lowest unit of evolution is actually a population. So in general English language, we say that, okay, this person has evolved over time, right? So when he was a kid, he was like this, but today he has evolved to something else. So that's just general English language, and that's got nothing to do with science in evolution. So now that is out of the way, there are certain restricted populations of in humans in which we see very, very different characters that you see from the general. But some of them, for example, are tallness. So certain populations in Europe tend to be more tall because it's just within them, the tallness seems to be a factor that is more preferred, right? Another very famous example is lactose intolerance. So milk, so milk contains a sugar called as lactose, and to break lactose, you need lactase, right? And generally, what happens is you have lactase production when you are a baby, right? And that's within the first 2 months or 3 months or so, and then this lactase production stops. Now, a very, very long time ago, there were these goat herders who started taking out goats. And for few of them, some of these individuals just by chance had this lactase production in their body, right? And most other people were actually lactose intolerant after the first 2 months. But what we have now, that gene that codes for lactase production, after 2 months, that gene has basically spread across the human population, right? So the humans are evolving definitely. You can even see that in the way we actually react to different diseases, right? There is always going to be variation within a population. I'm sure some of you have, when you get a cold, some of you react very badly. The same germ, when it infects somebody else, some of you don't react very badly. So evolution is actually happening every day. It's just happening at such a small scale that you're not able to see it.
Very nice. There is a very interesting fact, right? It is thought that nowadays we sit near the computer and keep glancing. So it is thought that the next species of humans that will come, they have a bulging eyes, and that will be carried over evolution. So I don't know what will happen in future, but it certainly is a fact that needs to be checked in future. Okay, so we'll go to the next question. It is from Shivans Mahapatra from DAV Public School, Unit 8, Bhubaneswar. He asks that is Glyptodon a species of dinosaur?
No, it is not a species of dinosaurs. So dinosaurs by descent are diapsids. And when I say diapsids, I mean that they have basically two holes behind their skull. And these holes are basically meant for attachment of muscles for biting. So glyptodons are actually synapsids, which mean that they have only one hole behind the skull, and they are more related to mammals than the dinosaurs. By the way, we still have dinosaurs living today. It's just in the form of birds. So birds are dinosaurs for all practical purposes. Right?
This brings to the next question. Are armadillo present nowadays? It is from Preeti Pragya.
Yes, very much. Armadillos are very much present nowadays. Yes.
Okay, the next question is Lokesh. Can we call microevolution as genetics and mutation?
Well, genetics and mutation is what causes microevolution. It's the other way around. So mutation is one of the causes of microevolution, and one of the major causes of microevolution actually. So there are these small changes that occur, and that's what causes changes in population. So that's what microevolution is. Yes.
And without that variation, adaptation would be difficult.
Yes.
Right. So that is something the students have to appreciate, that it is the basis of evolution in time to come. Right. So, and adaptation. So I just have to ask one more question. Why Fatima Al-Hasa, why are the green babblers called the ring species?
So they're called, so if you've noticed the picture that I had, so they've basically, the original population was in the southern Himalayas, right? And then there was one population that went west. There's another population that went east, right? And then you have on the top, when these two parts of these two subpopulations actually meet, they are not able to mate with each other. So they basically become two different species. And so it's basically like a ring-like structure, right? So it goes from down all the way till up. So that's why they called a ring species. So I guess it's a more catchy phrase to call it a ring species, because if you had called it something else, it is a speciation by means of moving from east and west of certain biogeographic barrier and all that. That would be really boring. It's more fun to call it ring species, I guess.
Okay, thank you. So next question from Avisha. I don't know the school, but she says that do all the species evolve together?
No. So that's a really interesting question. So of course, evolution is happening in all the species, but so in that way, all species evolve together. But the rate at which this evolution occurs is actually very, very different. So for example, you can't be comparing the rate of evolution of yourself versus say a fly like Drosophila, right? Because the generation time is very, very different, and this really matters. So in a word, yes, we are all evolving, and in some way or the other, but the rates actually differ.
Okay, thank you. So next question comes from Lokesh. Why such one such wonders that, let me reframe the question. This question has not. Let me go to the next question. What would be the natural force of selection for oviparity and viviparity?
That's a great question. So if you remember the example that I was telling you, so oviparity at the same skink, right? So it's oviparous in the plains, it's viviparous on the top, right? Now remember that these eggs have to be incubated at certain temperature, which is generally warm, right? And when you're in the plains, it's all the more likely that it is going to be warmer there, right? So therefore, it makes sense evolutionarily to be oviparous in the plains, right? So then the female can actually lay the eggs and then go around search for food, right? But when you're up in the hills, it can get cooler, and if it's cooler, there is all the more chance that these eggs are not going to survive, right? So therefore, the mother actually has to carry it inside her body, and make sure that they get the correct temperature. Because remember that these are also, even though they're called cold-blooded animals, they are not really, the blood is not really cold. They just maintain. They need external environment to actually maintain their body temperature to a certain level.
Okay, thank you. So next question is from Sonali Rath from Sai International School, who says, why early humans had larger brains than humans of this age?
Did early humans have larger brains than humans of our age? Well, I guess in terms of a lot of things have actually reduced in size, because there probably are more efficient means of uh, the same setup in a more efficient means. So I don't think I'm equipped enough to actually answer that question.
I have a question. This Bhagya Jyoti Thatoi. I have a question. Why the people of years ago, means around before Christ, they were tall than they were taller than us. The question has to be there. He is asking that why the people were taller before Christ than us. I don't know about that.
Actually, it is the other way around. There's been some research published last year that suggests that humans are actually growing taller now. Of course, it is going to be in certain populations, right? Because there is so much of intermixing in the human population. There is trade, and people can easily move around. But in certain populations, it turns out that they're actually getting taller than their ancestors. And I don't think there has been a lot of difference between before Christ and after Christ. So
that's correct. So Madhuri Mohanta is asking, is evolution a random process?
Evolution is a random process. Yes, it is definitely a random process. So for example, when you think of natural selection, you don't govern the kind of environment or the selection pressures that are out there, right? So let's take the mice that I gave as an example of these. There are these light brown colored mice, and there is these black colored mice. So they can't govern when the predator actually flies, right? So they can't do all these things. They can't govern the color of their body, right? It's not according to the whims and fancies, right? So what evolution is doing through natural selection is just giving a direction, right? But it is still random to start with, right? There is a direction towards a particular makeup of the body structure, but in a way, it is always going to be.
The next question is from Kashmirit from DAV Unit 8. Early humans had hair on their body and their hair density is continuously decreasing. Can it be called as evolution?
Early humans had, so if you're talking about some of the extinct species of the human-like ancestors, then they had far more hair on their body purely because of the kind of environment that they were in, right? So they either needed more hair in their body to retain water, or they needed more hair on their body to generate warmth. But the amount of hair that we have in our body in the current humans actually varies, right? And I don't think it's got nothing to do with how evolved you are. So it's just general variation within a population.
These are again some questions which are very general. I think Abhilasha Panda and Rajesh Pathak are asking, but important is that why evolution is important in all species and what are the factors controlling evolution. I think they have to, that needs more discussion, but you can just...
Yeah, so I think that's something that is going to be very difficult to explain. If evolution does not occur, you would not have been here right now. If evolution had not occurred, I would not have been able to talk to you right now. You would not have been able to understand it. So there's been a series of events that has led to what we are right now. So it's important to actually understand this process and how this thing actually occurs. I just like to give a disclaimer that I just spoke about evolution by means of natural selection. There are other ways that evolution can actually occur, but maybe that's for another time.
Actually, there are many questions. I'll just take one or two questions more for interest
Sure.
of time, and I'll pass on all the questions to you so
Sure,
that you can write. We have the email IDs of some of these students. We can write back to them with the answers and they can discuss further, right?
Sure.
If that will be okay. So I'll just take one. Is skin color the example of microevolution in humans? That is one question.
Well, yes. So skin color is produced by certain genes and how they react, right? So it's not just one gene; it's actually multiple genes that interact with each other. So in a way that can actually be a proponent of microevolution, right? But I can't definitely say that microevolution is occurring and all that. So for example, now especially, so for example, there's a lot of mixing. There's a lot of admixing in population. So it's not like you have a certain group of people who are dark skinned and certain group of people who are yellow skinned and certain group who are white skinned. So there is constant gene flow, right? So that also plays a huge part, right? If you were to talk about just within one population, say a dark skin population, and how evolution occurs there just based on skin color, then it would have been a completely different answer. But this is something a little more complicated to actually talk about.
Yeah, so I'll go to the next question from Fatima. Does the microbiome have a role in evolution of lactose intolerance?
Yes, definitely. So it's not just the lactase production, but also the microbiome that you have in your body that is also contributing to how you can develop mechanisms to be able to take in certain food. It's so for example, it's not just milk. So there are other examples such as breaking down plant material. So a lot of ruminants, for example, have specific microbiome in their body to be able to break down plant material. Even lizards, there are vegetarian lizards who are able to break down plant material. Not just that, there are I know of examples where there are lizards who are able to eat toxic fruits and flowers, and even the mucus, the milk that plants produce, that's supposed to be toxic, and they're able to break it down just purely because of the kind of microbiome that they have. What's even more interesting is so this microbiome, I know of a few examples where this microbiome is passed on from generation to generation, and it doesn't happen naturally. There have been so there are cases where so the father and mother have the microbiome in their body to be able to break down plant material, so cellulose. But their offspring, when the offspring is born, it doesn't have the ability. So what the father and mother do it actually makes sure the offspring feeds on their feces, the feces of the father and mother, and that feces basically contains microbiome that is able to generate this ability of breaking down plant material. So it just comes from their parents, but it's not like hereditary as you would expect in terms of genetics. It's just through a behavioral mechanism.
And also epigenetics has some role, right? Means
Yes.
in certain ways, but they have to get introduced into epigenetics in certain terms, but they can learn more in due course of time. I think there are so many questions, but in interest of time, I have to ask, can evolution be harmful in any way?
So harmful and non-harmful are words that we have invented based on how it is going to be for us. So that's something that is going to be very, very difficult. So certain things might be harmful for us, but it might be beneficial for some other species. So then how do you decide which is right and which is wrong? Because you're not at the top of the, you're not the ultimate species that is out there, right? You're just one of the species that is there in the world, right? So that's something that is going to be very difficult to, it's a more of philosophical question than scientific.
Yeah, I think I'll leave the last question with snakes and skinks, which will make you happy. So you have told that the snakes having limbs, does that signify something that there is a next generation of snakes?
Next generation of snakes, no. But in fact, snakes have evolved from ancestors that actually had limbs. In fact, the last fossil, the last really clinching fossil that suggests that snakes, the ancestors of snakes had limbs, was actually found in India. And this was about 4 or 5 years ago, I think. And snakes and skinks are not related. They are very, very farther apart in the evolutionary tree. So limblessness has actually evolved multiple times.
Okay. So the question is that during the evolution of snakes, skinks, is it before the snakes or after the snakes have evolved?
So I don't, I can't remember off the top of my head, but as far as I can remember, skinks are about 110 to 150 million years old. That's when they evolved. That's when the first fossil came up. Snakes are supposedly slightly younger than that. And
they evolved later on to that.
Yeah, much later. They're much younger, and from some of the studies, it's suggested that snakes actually diversified within a very, very short amount of time, whereas skinks actually took a much longer time.
Okay, I think I will leave you with this many questions, Roy, and I really thank you for giving a so exciting talk, and it will keep the students thinking in future. I will end thanking Roy with the thing, but he told me to introduce himself, that he's a field biologist stuck in a lab. Okay, so, but I forgot everything when he started introducing you. I could only remember that skink in Nicobar Island has been named after him, and that is what was, that is how I introduced him. But thank you, Roy, for a wonderful lecture, and we'll move on to the next one.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was a pleasure talking to anyone. And if anyone wants to reach to me, please feel free to do so.
Thank you. We move ahead from here to the next speaker. He is actually Dr. Shubhankar Vedanta. He is an associate professor at Niser. The topic that he will be talking today is the fun with nanomagnetism and spintronics. I just want to see, because Shubhankar, you are here. Can you please unmute yourself and put your video on so that we all can see you?
Yes, good afternoon, Devasmita. I'm sorry, maybe some internet was fluctuating in my office.
Okay, so you came to the auditorium?
No, just the
or it is a background, okay.
Yeah.
So just that we wanted to have the open day in the auditorium this time, where we can actually house 500 different students, and we were looking forward to it. Okay, so thank you for that. But I'll just have you introduce you, and then it will be all yours. The floor will be all yours. Okay. So Shubhankar actually has done his both his doctorate and postdoctorate from Germany, and I think postdoctorate he also had done from Germany as well as USA, right? 2 postdoctoral degree he has done. But what mostly we know Shubhankar from is that he's a very dynamic personality, and he has been awarded the Young Achiever Award in 2019 by the Department of Atomic Energy, India. He has published a lot of papers, but beyond that, what I really want you to excite the students, I just don't want to talk about your CV. I want you to come directly to the nanomagnetism and spintronics and excite the students about it. And the floor is all yours, Shubhankar.
Okay, thank you so much, Devasmita, and good afternoon, everyone. It's really my pleasure to be part of this, framework. Our Niser outreach is doing very well. I congratulate Devasmita and team for doing an excellent job for the benefit of young minds. And I'm really glad to be here. And thank you so much for giving an opportunity. So I share my screen now. So please tell me if you see my screen.
Yeah, it is perfect.
Okay, cool. Is my voice clear or is it making some echoes?
No, voice is clear. I think everything is perfect.
Okay, let me just use an earphone if that makes better.
I'll just see. Yeah. Can you
Can you
speak
hear
something?
me? Yes. Can you hear me now?
It is better.
Okay, then we'll keep it like that. Thank
Sure.
you. So please ping me if you have any problems. Just call me, Devasmita, because I'm just seeing the screen. I cannot realize if internet goes off or some other issues. Okay.
Yeah, I will unmute and let you know if anything.
Yes, yes. Or just call me to my mobile.
Okay, sure.
Okay, thank you. So welcome. So today's talk is about nanomagnetism and spintronics. So it is a topic in physics, but I think this is something which is also very much interesting for biologists, chemists, material scientists, and metallurgy, and so on. Not only physics. So anyway, I really enjoyed the lecture by Aniruddha. A fantastic talk, which shows how the perspective has changed about evolution. It's good to know that we are still the apes, or monkeys. I think I always believed I am a monkey because I behave like monkey. My grandparents told me from childhood time because of all the naughty things I did. So it's good to know that the perspective is actually getting better. So as we go on throughout the lecture, we will know about a couple of points. This, nano, then what is magnetism, what is spintronics, and obviously we want to do a lot of fun for our life. And this is just one, small thing you might have done, like you put a magnet on top of your palm, and then you put some kind of small magnetic pins, and you see that the pins are getting attracted to your palm because there is a magnet. Okay, so that's, I think, very simple experiment you can do anywhere in your home or school or anywhere, and that just shows that the concept of the lines of force or stress field of a magnet. So, and as we talk about evolution, I just made this slide while Aniruddha was speaking. So the computers, I think, without which now it is very difficult to live and very difficult to maintain a technologically competent society. If you look the computers evolution from 1944 till let's say now, the computer size is the physical size of the computers as like a very big. So you see the scale. Okay, I'm sorry, it's what is like 5 meters, and the size was like 20 kilobytes. Okay, equivalent to 20 kilobytes, and how it has improved over time, and now we are having our small smartphones or iPads or small scale computers with terabytes of data. Terabytes means 1,000 gigabytes. So this is also one type of evolution of technology and computers. Okay, so now when we talk about the term nanotechnology, so when the term nano comes, so many people actually think about this beautiful car, which is nano, but actually we were talking about objects or particles which are in the size range of 10 to the power minus 9 meter. That means you take 1 meter, which is roughly 3.5 feet, and you make it 10 to the, so you put 10 to the power 9, and you divide into that small pieces. So like it's really been smaller than what your hair has the dimension, much smaller than that. So you can imagine we are talking about the objects of that scale. Why? Because the objects like anything you say, gold, copper, cobalt, any metal you take or any object you take, whatever properties like electrical properties, mechanical properties, optical properties, those properties actually changes when you make smaller dimension. And sometimes you see, let's say if you take a big piece of gold and you measure its properties and you make it really small and like in nano dimension, you will see some of the properties will disappear or will be modified and some new properties will evolve. And that's the reason they're called as quantum dots, because the properties are dominated by the so-called quantum mechanics, which is another interesting concept in physics, which explains a lot of things. And the concept of nanotechnology actually came about, say, 50 years ago, when Richard Feynman, the very famous physicist, he gave a lecture in the American Physical Society meeting that there is plenty of room at the bottom. Please note that Richard Feynman was a theoretician. However, he gave a lecture like there is a lot of things we can do at the nanoscale. And that kind of excited a lot of people. And obviously, the term nanotechnology was coined by a Japanese professor in like 1970s. And then people are trying to, work a lot with materials at nanoscale, because you can tune or make new properties at the nanoscale. Okay, now when we talk about magnets, as a small kid, you must have done certain experiments at your home already, like fixing some kind of magnetic letters. Let me put this ledger pointer. Yeah, so fixing like magnetic letters on a fridge or almirah or something, and then you know about the lines of force by doing this very simple experiment. Like you take a bar magnet on top of the on below the table, and you basically put some iron dust, and you see the iron dust is actually arranging themselves. So that's basically tells the lines of force between the north and south pole are actually behaving like that. So these are very simple experiments which you must have done, or if you have not done, then I would suggest that you try. And magnetism is a very, very old subject. It's nothing new, like we started it only 50 years ago. It is very old subject. Magnetic objects in our society from very long time, and we are using in our daily life from very, very long time. Here I just took two representative images. So, this is like some magnetic spins are putting here. And this is written by William Gilbert, who was a doctor, a medicine doctor of the Queen Elizabeth. And in 1600s, he tried to actually explain the magnetic field of Earth. We all know that the Earth has a small magnetic field. It has a North Pole and South Pole. The magnetic field is weak, but it is there. There are, of course, a lot of theories and explanation about it. But he tried to explain it like 400 years back. And probably this is one of the first written book on anything. And if you look this image, and this is an image what we do in our lab, or modern researchers in the field of solid-state physics or magnetism, they work on. So they actually explain this kind of micromagnetic model where they put spins and try to see if you make a small object, how the magnetic spins will be oriented. And you see that these images look pretty comparable. Now, what is this? So probably this, recently you must have seen the serial Mahabharata, and you saw like when Arjuna goes to Draupadi's home, he killed this fish and gets Draupadi as his wife, isn't it? But this is actually one of the very first magnetic technology, not for Mahabharata, but this is simply what do you call this, magnetic compass needle, to basically the geographician who discovered like Vasco da Gama, Columbus, they use this kind of magnetic compass. We all know about Columbus. He actually started late 50th century, that means 1460, 70. He started discovering many continents or countries. But before that, Zheng He, a Chinese actually geographician, tried to also make a lot of adventure. And in early 15th century, he could discover a lot of countries, mostly in actually Africa. And it was possible because they had this compass needle, without which they could not actually navigate in the ocean. Okay, so magnetic compass is just one of the applications of magnetic technology. And if you say over the period of time, this is the evolution of magnetic compasses. So this is one of the very first compass used many 100 years ago. And this is a bit advanced magnetic compass. This is the compass which was used during World War, so in like 20th century. And obviously now everybody has a GPS system in your smartphones. So this is all possible because magnetic technology is with us. Then the question is when magnetic research on magnetism started. So I already told you the book William Gilbert, he wrote the Magnetic. So that was the book name in which he tried to explain many concepts about magnetism, and in particular the origin of magnetic field of Earth. I think probably in your textbook, physics or in science, you might have heard the names Oersted and Faraday. So these are the two actually biggest discovery happened in science, where basically Oersted told that electrical current can create magnetic field. If you have a simple like a wire or let's say a coil, or you make a many fold of the coil winding, then you can create the magnetic field differently. So that's basically the discovery of Oersted in 1820. And about 10 years later, Faraday discovers the reverse, that if you change magnetic field, you can create electric field. So these were two biggest discoveries in my opinion. And then came Maxwell's about 30 years later, who actually established the relation between the electricity and the magnetism. So this is how the concept of electromagnetism is there for us to explain many physical phenomena happening around. Now, when you're talking about magnetism, there are a couple of things to remember, like magnetic field, magnetization, magnetic movement, and obviously you have different units in SI and CGS. There are conversion factors. So you probably know about it. I just wanted to put it. Now, magnetic materials, you can broadly put into three categories. One diamagnetism. Basically, they are very difficult to magnetize. So like plastic, wood, paper, these are diamagnetic. If you put a magnet next to it, nothing happens usually, unless the magnetic field is really, really high. For instance, this experiment, why this video is not working? Yeah. People did this. Okay, I'm sorry, the video is not working. So this experiment was basically putting a frog, or unfortunately a dead frog, among very high magnetic field, and it was called a magnetic levitation. So all the frog is a diamagnetic object, but if you put higher magnetic field, you can levitate it. Now, this is experiment on oxygen. Okay, the oxygen we breathe, but that oxygen you can liquefy and you can make liquid oxygen. So what this gentleman is trying to do, he first put the liquid oxygen into the magnet, but the magnetic field was off because it's an electromagnet. If you give electric current, then this becomes a magnet. So first he poured the oxygen into the pole pieces, but there was no magnetic field, and you see liquid oxygen simply fell down. Now the magnetic field is active, and he is putting again liquid oxygen, and you see the liquid oxygen is sticking between the pole pieces. So that shows that oxygen is actually magnetic, but it is a special kind of magnetic. That means if you apply magnetic field, then only it gives its magnetic movement. If you remove the magnetic field, again the magnetic movements are disturbed and it is not magnetic. So that's basically about paramagnetic objects, and there are many in our periodic table. Now, the other materials are ferromagnetic. So let me just, okay. So it's ferromagnetic. And here you will see that even if you do not apply magnetic field, still the spins will keep its orientation and it will show basically magnetism. And there are only unfortunately few elements in the periodic table which are naturally magnetic, like they're created by nature already. And few of them are iron, cobalt, nickel. You can obviously make many alloys of different compositions, so that's how you can make many magnetic materials. But in terms of elements, we are a bit limited. And these magnetic objects, they have so-called hysteresis behavior. That means this is my magnetic field direction in x-axis, and this is the magnetization along the y-axis. So if you see at very high end of magnetic field, if you look, all the spins are oriented in this one direction. So if your magnetic field is along this direction, all the spins are oriented along the right direction. Now, if you apply magnetic field slowly along the left side, okay, so what will happen? The spins will slowly rotate, and you will see there are regions where the spins will have different orientation, and these regions are called magnetic domains or ferromagnetic domains. It is very important because in today's technology, the domain concept is very, very important, and you basically you can think, if I want to store information in each of these regions, or I call them as a bit in computer terminology, like 0, 1 bit in a classical computer, then this will be my basically the bits of a computer. So the smaller domains you can make, it is better, you can have higher density. And how these domains basically look, as this video will show that. So you see, like there is a background. So this is saturated in one direction. Now, when you apply magnetic field, oh, I'm really surprised why it doesn't work on this computer. Okay, so the domains will grow and they will become saturated. Okay. All right. Now, in magnetic technology, there are basically two concepts. One is the nanoparticle. So as I already told you, so the particle, like it's like a balloon, but it's a very, very tiny, small balloon in the scale of nanometers, few nanometers or few tens of nanometers. Then there is another technology which needs thin films, like a coating. Your mother must have made the dosa many times. Okay, it's a very thin layer of whatever you say, the yogurt or whatsoever you say of the rice flour. So it makes the dosa. Okay, so very thin. Similarly, if you make the materials or magnetic materials, or in general any materials, very, very thin coating on a substrate, then you call this as a thin film. So we have two possibilities: one are nanoparticles and another thin films, and these are very, very appealing and interesting for various reasons. Now, when we're talking about physics, so we many times try to take advantages of, or sometimes even we try to avoid of many fundamental concepts, interactions. So you know about van der Waals interaction. If you, or let's say we know about gravitational interaction. So the solar system is alive just because there is a gravitational interaction. So gravitational force is there. We are connected to the sun, and our moon is connected to us. It's all because of these gravitational interactions. So if the interaction would not be there, then we would just go anywhere we want, and then probably things will not be as it is at the moment. So similarly, when you want to put, let's say, magnetic elements or magnetic entities close to each other, so they will interact. It's just like small kids. If the kids are sitting in one room, couple of kids are there, they will talk, they will make friends, they will fight, they will have many interesting concepts when they are put together. And when they are far away, obviously you will have less interaction. Telephone is another way of connecting to each other. Internet is another way of connecting each other, but obviously personal interaction is stronger. So that way, you can see that if the things are closer, the interaction will be stronger. If the things will be further away, the interaction will be weaker. And the interparticle dipolar interaction, like if you put two magnetic entities close to each other, then there is a distance r between them. Then the interaction of the force will vary as a product of the magnetic charges divided by the r cube, where r is the separation. So that means if r is further, it is 1 over r cube, so it will become much weaker. Then there is exchange interaction, Zeeman energy, which is due to magnetic field. There are many concepts which actually we try to address. Now, what we try to address in current magnetism. So one is, as I said, the magnetic domains, where you want to make it smaller, you want to make it controlled, so that for future data storage concepts, you need those things. The other is spin dynamics. As I said, there are electron has a spin, and you can address that spin, and you can address the spin dynamics, how the spins will fluctuate, and that will also lead to many applications in future. Now, these magnetic materials can be classified into two broad categories. One is soft and another hard. Soft, we know, like a sponge or a balloon, you can squeeze it. It's not about that. It's physically, structurally, it is dense. However, magnetically, it is soft because you need less magnetic field to saturate it. Okay, if you look, this is the hysteresis curve. Now, for this one, for instance, you need high magnetic field compared to this one where you need small magnetic field. So therefore, the materials where you need small magnetic field to saturate are called soft magnetic materials, and the materials where you need much higher magnetic field, they are called hard magnetic. Both the magnetic materials have their own applications. Okay, so the soft magnetic materials, they are used in inductor, transformer cores, recording heads. The hard magnetic materials, they are used as permanent magnets, recording media, and so on. Okay, so here just one example. So let's say this is the hard magnetic material. So once you magnetize it, it will retain its magnetization. It will be magnetic, and you might have some permanent magnets in your home, which you take to a nail or something, and it will attract. Okay. Then there are called soft magnets. So basically, you have like a magnetic material, and you put, or a metal, and you put some a current in it. Then what will happen? It will create the so-called electromagnetic induction. You might have done that experiment in your laboratory, or you will probably do it one day. It's called electromagnetic induction. Okay. So, and then obviously these soft magnetic materials have their many applications. Now, as an experimentalist, what you want to do, you have all the flexibility to play around, to explore new materials, new material combinations. You look new physics in it, and finally, how you can use those fundamental physics usable for applications for benefit of human race. Now, as I told, the magnetic nanoparticles. So let's say these are magnetic nanoparticles. You immerse in some kind of solvent, okay, some liquid we take, and you mix it, and you make like a solution, like you put salt in water, and it becomes salt water. Okay, so salt water, actually salt is miscible, but there are many times you make a solution which is not miscible, like you take some dust and you mix in water, and you mix it, then you will see it's like a solution of dust in water. So similarly, you can take magnetic nanoparticles, you can make a solution of it, and that's called ferrofluid, because the nanoparticles are ferromagnetic and it is in a fluid, so it is called ferrofluid. Those ferrofluids are very interesting. I mean, I'm really surprised these videos don't work. Okay. So you can, maybe I can later on show some videos of these ferrofluids, how you can make beautiful art out of this, simply using the concept of lines of force. Okay, now how to proceed in magnetic nanotechnology. So there are basically three approaches you have to follow, in my opinion. One is you have to create, you have to really make new materials, new alloys. Alloys means what? You take cobalt and iron. Now you can take 50-50%. You can take cobalt 80%, iron 20%, or vice versa, or you can vary basically. Any permutation combination you can do. And obviously you will see the magnetic properties will be very different from one composition to other. So that's basically goes in the create. Then we explore. Explore means what you can do. Now you take, let's say, cobalt 50, iron 50 composition. Now you make different, size of it, different shape of it. Shape means you can make circular, you can make triangular, you can make like a diamond shape. You can make many shape of nanoparticles. Then what happens? Then you have to understand, if let's say the circular nanoparticle behaves different to a cubic nanoparticles, then you have to understand why. What is the physics behind it? Once we are actually through all these three steps, we can make basically technology and application. So engineers will come into picture, and they will make interesting stuff, and they are making interesting stuff for us. Now, when you want to create, as I said, you want to make magnetic nanoparticles. So here the challenges are, you have to have a good control of the particle size. You have to have a good control of the crystallinity. It can be amorphous, polycrystalline, or one single crystalline structure. You also need to have a control of the shape. Let's say today you prepare, you get nice spherical particles. and with the same recipe, tomorrow another person makes it, and he does not get spherical, he gets triangular. Then this technology is not good. So you should have a very reproducible technology which is well understood, and you have really complete control. Then there are many ways to prepare magnetic nanoparticles or thin films. I'm not going into details. There are many. I will just select two of them. One is so-called sputtering, where basically I think the concept is you put some argon ions, you ionize it, and argon becomes argon plus. Okay. Now you have a cathode which is negatively charged. On top of it, you put a plate of some metal. Let's say I want to deposit gold. So I put a gold target or a gold plate here. And please note that below gold, this cathode is there, which is an electrode, is negatively charged. Now, if in the chamber I fill with positive charged argon ions, then what will happen? Those argon ions will hit towards and move towards the cathode. But before they reach the cathode, they will reach this target material. And then the gold material will get evaporated. Okay, gold ions will get basically evaporated. Now, there will be a plume, okay, or plasma of gold. Now, if you put a substrate or something, then on top of it, this gold will get deposited. Now, if I make a proper control over it, then I can make few nanometer, I can make less than a nanometer in angstrom thickness also, or I can make a thicker film. Depends how much time, what kind of rate of deposition you are taking. So just for one example, I will show how this deposition happens. So this is inside a chamber, and you create that plasma, and you see how the ions are getting evaporated from the target and getting deposited on some substrate. But remember, these techniques are pretty expensive, well controlled. That's the advantage, but the demerit is it's very expensive. And so you need to actually explore other techniques. The chemical methods are much cheaper and well controlled. Again, many techniques, all techniques have their own advantages and demerits. And as I said in the beginning, the magnetic nanotechnology is not only limited to physics, it is actually usable in many fields. And the chemists, they also try to prepare these nanoparticles. They take different precursors, they mix it, they make some chemistry cooking, and finally they can very nicely prepare these magnetic nanoparticles. And if you take a solution of this magnetic nanoparticle, you pour on top of a substrate, you will see they will have self-assembly. Now, finally, what you want to do with it, basically with these nanoparticles, the idea is to make the new computer hard drives out of these nanoparticles. Like each nanoparticle, you can have like a bit 0, 1. So the smaller the nanoparticles, the more number of nanoparticles you can put on a substrate, and then you can basically read write the information, and you can have high density storage devices. So this is just an example of some magnetic nanoparticles where, if you, this is a scanning electron microscope and a TM image here, transmission electron microscope, and these are looking like nanoparticles. But if you zoom in of each of these images, you see there are many nanoparticles in it. And if you look carefully, very interesting feature you find that there are like, stairs, like different floors in a building. You see like different stairs of nanoparticles. Okay, so whereas there are a lot of empty area around. So this is called a supercrystal, or many times called supracrystal, because the nanoparticles are making like a crystal. Okay, so in a crystal, basically atoms make a crystal, but here the nanoparticles are making like a crystal, whereas there are a lot of empty space around it. So the nanoparticles, which is like in the 5th floor, they have gone here, but it is preferring to make a stacking rather than going into this empty area. And remember, the nanoparticles, they don't have leg and hand to climb, on top of the making a floor by floor, but it is happening. And this is something definitely to do with the van der Waals force on the one hand, and on the other hand, to do with the dipole interaction. So things are not really understood, and many people are trying to address that. Now, I want to actually show the concept of supermagnetism with magnetic nanoparticle. This is a very interesting topic, and this was my PhD photo. In Germany, they give you a hat, and if you look on top of the hat, there is a Superman. So for my little son, he thought that my father has done something on the Superman, but it is not. It is the supermagnetism, how this top thing. Okay. So basically, if you have a big magnetic nanoparticle, then you are at high temperature. So there is something called a Curie temperature, above which the spins are randomly oriented. So they are called in the paramagnetic state. Now, if you go below the Curie temperature, you see some spins will be in align, and this is called a ferromagnetic domain, which we have already discussed. Now, if you reduce the size of the particle, so you make it smaller and smaller. So remember, there are two types of energy. The energy between the spins, there is some interaction, and this domain wall, which is like a wall between one house to another house, or between one room to other room, it needs also some energy. Okay, so there is a domain wall energy, and there are some energy between the spins. So there is a competition between those two energies. So that means when you make it smaller and smaller, you will not have the possibility to have any domain. So that means all the spins will be in the same direction, and that's called a single domain nanoparticle, or it's called the superspins. Okay, Demaswita, do you see my full screen, or do you see this Zoom pictures also on the screen?
What pictures?
Like, do you see my full screen? The title of the slide, do you see?
I don't see a single domain nanoparticle. That is what you mean to say, right?
Yes, okay.
Yeah,
so
we can see that. Yeah,
okay,
everything is fine.
Okay, fine. And how much time I have?
I think another 5-6 minutes.
Okay,
if it is
fine.
okay.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Because we want to spend time on question answer.
Yeah, sure. I will wrap it up. Okay, so these magnetic nanoparticles are very interesting, as I said. So if you put these magnetic nanoparticles close by, so then they will interact. If you put it further away, they will interact less. So how this magnetic property will change, and this basically depending on these interactions, you can have many interesting physics, and these are all usable in different type of future applications. So due to lack of time, I'm not going into details, but I want to show one video. I hope this video works. Okay, I will show maybe that video during discussions, how these magnetic nanoparticles are usable in biology. So basically in medicine and in healthcare. Okay, so another interesting thing is, about defects. So when we say something is defective, you don't want to buy something which is defective. So let's say this was our School of Physical Sciences T-shirt from last year, which was a nice T-shirt. And in general, if you want to buy a T-shirt or a shirt from a shop, then you don't want any defects. There should be no holes, everything should be nice. But if you want to buy a shirt, and for every button, there is a small hole or button pocket. Now you want to buy a shirt and you somehow see the tailor master has forgot to make a hole in this. Probably you will not buy it. Although this is actually one type of hole, this is defective. You see my point, that defects are sometimes needed and sometimes it's useful. Okay. So another example is this biscuit, bonbon. I don't know, I think many kids like it, and I also like it very much. If you look the biscuit, there are many holes in this. Did you ever ask why there are holes in this biscuit? Because maybe the company is trying to cheat you. If you try to Google it and you find the company claims by making such holes, basically it kinds of emits all the humidity out of it, and the biscuit remains more crispy, and its durability is longer. So you see the defects are sometimes useful. And now if you look our roads, you have many potholes. Okay, and you don't want to go into the potholes. Yeah, look, now this is rainy season. If you go to a village where it has potholes, all these people will try to avoid. And you see this gentleman, he's trying his best not to go into the potholes. He's trying, as much as he should stay on the remaining road. Okay, just imagine if this is a magnetic thin film, and I make such holes. Okay, so the only magnetic film is here. Then this guy, and I compare it as a magnetic domain, then the domain will be only between these available magnetic area. And that's exactly the concept of magnetic antidot lattices. So you make a thin film and you make periodic defects. So these circular white shaped objects are basically holes. You can do it by modern technology. It's called lithography. And you can make circular, you can make triangular, you can make any shape you want. You can tune the distance between them, and you can actually do a lot of interesting things. Now, the advantage here is that the whole magnetic object is exchange coupled, so it is very strong magnetic. So now, by making such holes, I am basically allowing the domains to stay within this area. So that means the smaller and the smaller I make these holes, and the closer and closer I make them, so then I can make the domains smaller and smaller, which is very good for future technology. And this is just one. Oh, thankfully this video works. So you see that the domains are happening only between this available area. So the triangles are basically holes. And if maybe I start again. So the triangles are basically holes, and the magnetic object is only this kind of stripes here and here. So when I allow to make magnetized universal, you see the domains are only happening between these available areas, and the domains are becoming smaller and smaller. This is in micron scale, but we have also done in nanoscale, and this is a very nice way to actually control magnetic domains. Okay. Now let's go to computers. I have already shown you how computers have actually changed our life, and here I saw the famous IBM Ramak computer 305 Ramak from 1956. It was the first commercial computer. The weight was nearly 1 ton. Storage capacity is 4.4 megabyte. In modern times, if you take any song, okay, the size would be much more than that. So you cannot actually store even one song in a 1 ton machine. And the space you need something like 30 feet by 50 feet, much bigger than a room. So now you see your current technology, we have the laptops, they're like 1 kg. Now we have laptops, and you have space, something like 1000 gigabyte, 2.5 lakh times space you are able to use, because there has been something from magnetism community, and that's basically goes to, let me just quickly go. Yeah, so these two gentlemen discovered the concept of giant microresistance. He is Professor Albert Ford. This is Professor Peter Grunberg. He unfortunately died 3 years ago. And Professor Albert Ford is in France. They discovered this concept where two ferromagnets are separated by a non-magnetic layer, and you pass current. Then you can have different resistance states. And probably this video will explain that. I requested my students to demonstrate it. Just imagine these are two ferromagnetic layers, and the electron is going, because they are facing the same way, the electron can easily pass through. Okay, so there is no resistance for the electron. Now, just imagine if these two ferromagnets or these two balls are actually facing each other. Now the electron is trying to escape through them. Now she can hold it. Electron could not pass. Okay, the same way is basically here. That if your magnetization is parallel, so then you can easily pass the electron either left or right, and these are the low resistance states, and that's basically the zero state of a modern computer. And now if the magnetization is anti-parallel to each other, then when the electron goes, there will be scattering, so you will have maximum resistance, and that's basically the one state of a computer. Okay, so this is the basic concept of a read-write of a hard disk drive or SSD. But obviously we have another technology is this. So this is SSD, how the magnetic materials are used. So due to lack of time, I'm skipping it. But you know about the flash drive or SSD. So where the information is basically stored in transistors. Okay, so it's like in capacitors. So you have electrons. You charge the capacitor, and the electrons are charged. So capacitor is charged. So this is, let's say, my one state. And if electrons are not charged, so then it is my zero state. And if you see, they're going in your computer in SSD drives. So it's 0.5 micron. So it's very, very tiny objects in your computer, and they're very good. Unfortunately, they need much energy. That's the only problem. And to avoid it, now the new concept of spintronics has come, where people try to use so-called spin current. So I'm not going into detail, but if there are interest, I can answer it. Where people can use spin current, and you will have more non-volatile memories, and which will also use less energy. Okay, so this, Devasmita, should I stop now or 2-3 minutes I have?
Yeah, stop. Finish it and then stop. Shubhankar,
Okay.
your choice.
Okay, all right. 2 minutes, I will finish.
Sure.
So now this, this giant magnetoresistance, or the also called tunnel magnetoresistance, depending if the non-magnetic material is a metal, then it is called giant magnetoresistance, because there will be something called RQQI exchange interaction. But if this special layer is a non-magnetic insulator, then it will call the tunneling magnetoresistance. But the point here is how these magnetic layers, as I said, magnetic entities always interact depending on their species. Now, how they will interact? So if you have, let's say, 3 layers, so the first layer is towards right, then it will try to make the second layer towards left, because energetically this is the ground state. So minimum energy, and that's the ground state. Now the first layer is to the right, it will also interact to the third layer. So then if you consider the second and third, then there is a frustration happening, isn't it? So this is very similar to our Indian movies. Sometimes you have, one hero, 2 girls, or vice versa. And if you have many layers, just imagine there are 10 layers, then there are many such 10 interactions. Then finally, what would be the final ground state? So to address that, you need to understand the physics behind it, and you will see the domains from different layers that shows that the magnetization will be different in each layer, and they will go in a sinusoidal way, okay, to stabilize the ground state. So due to lack of time, I'm not going into details. I think there was maybe
We should stop it. Yeah.
Yes, I think I can stop.
Thank you so much.
I just want to thank my group. Okay, I just wanted to show that there are flexible devices people are making. I just want to thank my group. And so I would like to thank you all for your kind attention. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shubhankar. Actually, I missed all the Zoom questions in the last talk. So I will start with the Zoom questions. Okay. The first question comes from Swati Prakash Sadangi. She says that, can the concept of nanomagnetism and spintronics be used to address superconductivity of certain materials and be used to create resistant free conductors? You can see that in your screen too.
Yeah, I can see it. Can the concept of nanomagnetism and spintronics be used to address superconductivity of certain materials and be used to create resistance-free conductors? Okay. Actually, I should tell you, the superconductors and magnetism, they are not good friends. Okay. So historically, the materials which are superconductors, they're diamagnets. There is something called Meissner effect. Probably you are a young student, you do not know about it. So superconductors basically repel from magnetic field. So if something is magnetic, it will not be superconductor. Obviously, there are new developments which are called iron-based superconductor. So they are partly magnetic and superconductor. But I think the field of magnetism is probably not so useful for superconductor.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Anshuman Padi, who says, can you spin current? How can spin current be used? No. How can spin current can be made to encrypt and later decrypt the transmitted information? Yeah, it's a very nice question, Anshuman. I think it's from Niser, our student. Okay, so spin current, basically you want to write it. Okay, so reading is always through the GMR sensor. So encryption will be done by the spin current, and writing, and the reading would be basically simply through GMR sensor. Okay, what will be the next generation technology? Yeah, it's a very interesting question. So due to lack of time, I could not go into two things. So one is about flexible devices. So maybe here. So you see, now we need devices which can actually, sense our movement. Or let's say there is a patient who is in coma or who is in paralysis, and you want to monitor if in a day he really moves his hand or leg. And one is physically not possible that another person will sit next to it for the whole time. So you put a device
on the body, and if the person makes a movement, then you will get a signal. So you can come in the evening and see, oh, today the patient has actually moved his hand a few times. So, and there are, of course, pressure sensors, heartbeat monitoring. So this is called the flexible spintronics. So we have mobile phones, and I mean, I didn't put it here. Some, mobile phones, it falls down, it breaks. But now already mobile phones are in the market, which are called flexible. So you can twist it, okay, and you can see the whole screen twisted. Okay, so this is the, I think, next generation technology. And in terms of computers, the current technology is pretty good, but the only thing is it is consuming a lot of electricity. The SSDs, which uses transistors or capacitor concepts. So you need to actually charge the computer a few times in a second, just to charge the capacitor. But if you will go the spin current based technology, then you will not have that problem. So once the information is written, unless you rewrite it, it will be stored and you don't need power. So I think that will be the next technology where a lot of people in the world are working. And probably already, it's called spin orbital torque based. I mean, I'm sorry, I did not have time to go into those details. But already recently, the NASA sent one robot to Mars. And in that, they have already used this new technology RAM. So unfortunately, this technology is already in market, but it's very expensive. So probably in a few years, it will become cheaper and it will be accessible for all. Yeah, so that's the basically future technology.
So that can be useful for the medical field, right? Very, very useful.
Yeah, medical. Actually, unfortunately, my video did not work. I'm sorry, but maybe during some other questions, I can dig out this video and I can show you. So it's already magnetic nanoparticles have been greatly used in healthcare. And yeah, so I just hope I will be able to show.
So I will move on to the next question.
Yeah, please.
So why magnetic compasses are filled with a liquid?
Why magnetic?
Somnath Rath from Mother's Public School, he asks us why magnetic compasses are filled with a liquid.
I think it is because the compass it's a physical object, isn't it? So it will move. It will show you the north-south pole. Okay. So so depending on your position where you are, the compass has to move. If it will not move, so it will become a problem. I think that's the reason. And if you keep it just in air, so then probably simply vibrations or simple air can disturb it. But if it is inside a liquid, so it will be kind of controlled atmosphere, and the movement will be more precise. I think that's the reason.
Okay. So next question is from Shivansh Mahapatra. He says, sir, tell us how water is diamagnetic.
Why water is diamagnetic?
How water is diamagnetic.
Okay, very nice. So, the origin of ferromagnetism, obviously it is a bit complicated, but it goes to the density of state. So electrons in the energy level, if you go in the atomic physics, so the electrons, there are different energy levels, and how many electrons are there? So it's called density of states. Okay. Then there is something called exchange integral, and there is something called Stoner criteria. So the product of this exchange integral and the density of states should be more than one. So that is one idea. Another very simple idea would be in the periodic table. If you look the electrons and its orbital occupancy of electrons. So it has been believed that if the d orbitals are half-filled, then it will show ferromagnetism. Now, water consists of hydrogen and oxygen. None of these elements are actually magnetic. That's the reason water is, I think, diamagnetic.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Mahashangram Kar from Kendra Vidyalaya, Bhadrak. He writes, does Earth has atmosphere due to the magnetic field?
I'm sorry, can you repeat, please?
Does Earth has atmosphere due to the magnetic field?
Well, I don't know. I don't think so. See, Earth has a very, very small magnetic field. And the magnetic field is, I think, 0.04 millitesla. So it's very small magnetic field, and it has all XYZ component. So you sometimes hear the story when you go to Konark Sun Temple. These guides will tell that there was a big magnet, and that magnet was attracting a lot of ships, and they were colliding in the bank of the sea. So that's the reason they removed. But that's a simple fraud story, because magnetic field, we know it will become extremely weak when you go far away from the magnet. So this is going to simply Biot-Savart's law. So the distance is more, the magnetic field is weak. So I don't think the atmosphere has anything to do with the magnetic field. I think answer is no, but I need to cross check again.
Okay, the next question comes from Om Aditya Rakshit, who says that he's from DAV school, public school, Unit 8 Bhubaneswar, who says that what happens is when a magnet is brought near a magnetic material, what happens is due to the force exerted by the field of electrons arrange themselves into small magnetic materials. So how these small magnetic molecular magnets are made because of that force exerted.
Is it in Zoom or from YouTube?
It is from YouTube.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Zoom
Then can
questions
you
are done. Zoom questions are done. This is little.
Okay. Okay. Can you please repeat the question?
The question I am also, he says that what happens when a magnet is brought near the magnetic material, what happens is due to the force exerted by the force, the electrons arrange themselves into small molecular magnets. Is it that small molecular magnets are formed because of this, when two magnets are brought together? He wants to understand that about it.
No, I think the question is probably easy.
Tricky, right? I also could not understand myself.
But the question is good. I'm really appreciating the efforts. So the molecular magnets are basically, it's a class of materials where in a molecule there is one magnetic atom. Okay. So and it shows its magnetic properties. It's very, very interesting. A lot of chemists work. Devasmita, Professor V. Chandrasekhar, our ex-director, he works a lot on molecular magnets. But the other is, I think you are telling that there is like a magnetic object, and you bring magnetic materials to it, and it will become magnetic. Actually,
yeah, it becomes smaller magnets. That they will arrange themselves into small molecular magnets. That is what the question is.
No, probably it's not. I'm anyway opening YouTube so that I can see the questions.
Can we come back to this question while
yes.
So
yeah,
another 2-3 questions are there.
Yeah, please.
What is the factor that determines whether a particular magnetic metal ion will show T1 or T2 relaxation more efficiently? This is Mahasangram Kar from Kendriya Vidyalaya, Bhadrak.
Okay, it's a very nice question. See, T1, T2 relaxation, this is more structure, I think, like liquid molecules. So they have this relaxation time. So how the dynamics is happening, how the atoms or the compound is structurally behaving. So I think T1, T2 is probably not so relevant in terms of magnetism.
Okay, thank you. So the other question is, why are there sphere-like structures in the nanoparticles?
Why there are sphere-like structure?
Steps in a sphere. Yeah.
Okay, this, I mean, very nice question. So the spheres, they have least surface tension, so it's easy to make, I would say. And many times when we take spherical particles, so the number of spins is basically, if you look at the surface of the sphere and the volume, so that ratio also matters a lot. So in terms of sphere, that ratio is good. So many times people take spheres, but in general, we also take different shapes, and they're also having their own advantages.
And this is Shivans Mahapatra from DAV Schools, Unit 8 Bhubaneswar. I just want to tell the name of the students which will encourage them. So That's
Yeah,
the purpose of, because of interest of time, we cannot allow them all to ask questions. So I thought I should just tell their names and schools.
sure, sure.
So Shubham Kumar from Kendriya Vidyalaya number 4 says that if we use the superposition properties of atoms or electrons, can we store data not only in binary methods or only, but also in bits and qubits?
I mean, it's a fantastic question. So this goes to the quantum computation. So the computers what we are using in our offices or in our home, it is classical computer. It uses simply the concept of 0, 1. Okay, what you are telling? So obviously yes. So you take the 2 states and you take any possible combination of the states, and that's how you generate many qubits or the quantum bits. And that's probably the next generation of computer. Already it is there, but it is obviously at very, very low temperature, much expensive. But probably, I don't know, maybe in 20 years or so, we should have quantum computers with us. And whatever you asked, yeah, it's possible, definitely.
So a question comes from Kendriya Vidyalaya, Rourkela. This is a school where I studied. So how does elements got their magnetic field?
How the elements got magnetic field?
Yes.
Well, I mean, the point is, if the object is magnetic, then it will have its magnetic field. Okay, so and the lines of forces will be there. So, and then the question is, why that particular element is magnetic? It's nature. So, because of the, as I said, the electronic structure, how in different orbitals the electrons are arranged. So, it has been proved that if it is mostly in d orbitals, have field, and there are certain other criteria also. If it fulfills, then that element will become magnetic. Now, if it is magnetic, it will have magnetic field.
Okay. So I think the last question, which also is not very clear to me, but maybe you will understand. It is from Somnath Rath from Mother Public School. He says that, sir, what is the actual meaning of there are more rooms at the bottom? Maybe you used it for explaining something. What do you want to convey by that?
Yeah, it's very, very nice question. No, I admire the curiosity. So there is plenty of room at the bottom. That means bottom means it's small. Okay. So many times we don't go to very small scale in detail. So Richard Feynman actually told. I mean, to answer that question, I will tell you. So say 50 years ago, people were also working not only magnetism community, semiconductor community, superconducting community, or any other community. They were also working at few hundred nanometers. Okay, we know 1 micrometer is 1000 nanometers. Now, if you have, let's say, an object, let's say cylinder, and its length is 500 nanometer, but people were reluctant that time to tell it is 500 nanometer. They rather prefer 0.5 micrometer. Okay, so because they think, okay, it's not necessary to go to nanometer scale, but later on they realize that when you actually make smaller and smaller, you get new properties, which is very, very interesting. So that's the reason Richard Feynman actually kind of trying to motivate, because Richard Feynman was a very very famous physicist, and whatever he says, people take it seriously. So he was trying to motivate that you people should really work on now small size objects, so nano size objects or nanotechnology. So that is basically the motivational speech, that you must work with small scale. Bottom means small scale objects.
Thank you, Shubham. A very nice talk, and I think this brings us to the end of the question. And hopefully we will have, if any students ask any other questions which we'll know further, we'll pass it on to you.
Yes, I mean, I have put my contact details here. So if any of you has any question, then please just send me an email and I will try to answer it. Okay?
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for your attention. And thank you so much for asking so many interesting questions. Thanks, Devasmita, for coordinating.
Thank you.
I stopped sharing and yeah.
Sure. We'll just carry on with the next. We just have to spend little more time with the vote of thanks, and there are many people who have made this event possible. So I just need to thank them.
Thank you so much. Yes.
first of all, thank you and Roy to make it so exciting, right? So this wouldn't have been possible without your so much efforts and answering the questions so nicely. So, but to start with it, I would like to thank Director Niser, Professor Sudhakar Panda. He has been he came out of a meeting to actually give a little a message to all of us. So that is really nice of it. And the infrastructure at Niser that actually helps us to do all the events like this. I look forward. This is the first event we are trying to do virtually with so many people around in different parts of the country. So it is possible that we can do it more in future, but we have shared the feedback forms. The students, I'll come back to him. Akshay has actually shared the feedback forms both in YouTube for the people who have joined and the people who have joined in Zoom. So please feel free to, I would really ask you to fill the feedback form, which will really help us to organize these events in future. The second, then I come back to the committee members of the outreach committee at Niser. There are many faculty who work in the background. I'm speaking in behalf of all of them. Dr. Shubhankar, Dr. Raj, Dr. Pankaj, Dr. Pranay. These all people have been, did I miss someone who was actively involved in this? So these all people have been really helpful in coordinating all the work that has been brought into the forum. So I really take this opportunity to thank them for their continuous effort. Now, then we move on to basically the teachers, right? The principals, first and foremost, I already told in the beginning, it was a very late event which we could put everything together because of logistic issues. And the assistant commissioners of Kendriya Vidyalayas of both Odisha as well as Chhattisgarh region, they communicated it means with a request they actually passed on to all the principals and it was all sent to the school. So it was really a thank you, sir. And I think Shri Chowdhar and Shri Ashok Mitra, they are in the audience somewhere, but I really thank them to be for helpful, and all the principals. Apart from that, there are a number of private schools also. There were 125 schools around Bhubaneswar who actually had students had registered. I somehow have to figure out the number of registrants were much higher than the number of participants at command. I gather it from all my friends all over the country is that it is always like that. It is not that people who register, they just join. When they get an email, they just feel excited about a thing. But later on, when the day comes, they might just lose that interest. So maybe that happened. Maybe there was some technical faults. That's the reason we look forward to actually filling up the feedback form. And there are reasons, there are places where you can put your descriptive points also, what you think. How it was, so that would really help us to organize it better. Then finally, the computer section of Niser, they really have been very helpful. This is the first time I learned how to actually connect a Zoom talk to a YouTube link. Means it has been a week's time. We figured it out. Actually, Pushpindu from Dr. Shubhankar's lab, he and his friend, I have just forgot his name, both of them were really helpful, and all the computer center people, Saikat, Tapan, and everybody who's as a staff around, Dipankar, everybody actually, they actually put everything together so that it was really very helpful for us. So I'm just forgetting one name. I just should acknowledge him who came with Tapan. It is actually Anandaraman. He also was really very helpful to bring all this together so that we could put these talks together. And finally, and not the least, the entire event is run by students, right? The whole concept of Open Day is not only to instigate and motivate the people who are outside to science, but also to train our students for scientific inquiry, to train our students to organize events like that, which will be really helpful for them in future. starting from deciding on the speaker list, who would be the next speaker and how it will be organized, and all the things painstakingly are done by students themselves. I just help them, means I'm always just like a teacher. I am the one who says that this is not correct, please correct it, please edit it. These are the points I come into picture, but it is run by the students and it is run for the students. And you can see the excitement when students come to Niser. These children or the students of Niser, what they have learned in their classroom, they design an experiment. And every year the experiment is different. And this is really appreciated by all. Unfortunately, we cannot bring them in a virtual forum, but we are thinking of putting some small videos or anything in future if we can do that. That it is a long haul. But yes, I thank all the student coordinators. I think on behalf of the student volunteers and Akshay, are you there? Can you please unmute yourself and
Yes,
put
ma'am.
a video on so that we can actually see you? Anshuman is there and Chandan. These three people are at least here. Akshay, anyway, I think they are in their rooms, hostel rooms, so they may not like to put the. Okay, thank you, Akshay. So he has been on the background for almost a year, and we wanted to do the 2020 event, which we were unsuccessful. After everything was planned, we had to stop because of pandemic. But bringing back is that this opens up new opportunity, right? We would not have been able to reach out to, what we do is that we go to the schools and tell that please select some students and bring it to them to Niser, and they are the ones, because there is a limit to the classroom size, right? So here what happens is that those students who are only interested would come to this program. There is no force. There is nothing. So that is something they are really motivated who came for this program. So we will keep the ball rolling, but your feedback is really important. And I think if I am missing something, Akshay, you want to say something? I think I covered most of it. But is there something that you want to tell?
Ma'am, I think you have covered everything.
I have covered everything.
Yes,
okay, thank you, Akshay. Thank you. And thank you everyone for a nice afternoon. We'll keep it we will keep you informed about future events, and thanks a lot. Okay. Bye everybody.